Welcome to Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. The Shinnecock Nation are affirming their rights to fish on their traditional territory around Long Island, New York. They're fighting an illegal fishing charge for a Shinnecock citizen. The case is now in federal court. The tribe argues they have never relinquished their fishing rights to the U.S. government. We'll hear from Shinnecock citizens and legal experts about the cultural and legal implications of the case. We're back after the news.
This is National Native News. I'm Antonia Gonzalez. Summer is prime time for gathering and baking camas across the Pacific Northwest, Rockies, and Plains regions. Native people usually harvest, then bake the plant's bulbs as part of their first foods menu. As Brian Bull of Buffalo's Fire reports, there was even a bake-off held outside Eugene, Oregon.
Silet's tribal member Joe Scott heads the Traditional Ecological Inquiry Program under the Long Tom Watershed Council. He described how he'd layer his packets of leaf-wrapped camas bulbs.
Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw the wet sword ferns on top of this. Bunch of water, like a couple of buckets of water after the maple leaves. And then a layer of these skunk cabbage leaves, put the packets on top of that, and then the alder and the ferns and all this stuff right here.
Oh, and there's mugwort, hazel, and bracken ferns in Scott's recipe, too. The whole oven hissed with steam once the water hit the hot rocks. Nearby, the TEIP senior intern and my kid, Samuel Bull of the Nez Perce tribe, assembled the second oven with Mom's help. This was mostly ferns, maple leaves, and camas bundled in skunk cabbage leaves, with some carrots and potatoes thrown in for experimentation's sake, all under canvas and 4 buckets of water.
Yes, I would put the camas closer to the middle.
Okay.
Give those to Joe. Right there is great.
Is it cooking?
Yeah, it's starting to steam.
Flash forward to a day later. Bull decided to do a camas bake for 24 hours. The group peeled back the canvas to reveal glistening and translucent camas bulbs.
Looks good.
Oh, look at those beauties.
Good? It's really good.
Give me some flavor notes.
Really soft, sweet, it's starchy.
I'm so happy.
Wow.
And yes, Bull's potatoes and carrots came out well too. Scott's batch baked for nearly 26 hours and had a small fire burning atop his oven for part of that time. At first, there was a little concern as some bulbs were hardened and dark, but then when the rest were unearthed...
They're perfect. They're like a sweet gumdrop.
The longer bake meant Scott's camas were more caramelized and sweeter. But at the end of the day, Scott said the real success of the event was creating community. For National Native News, I'm Brian Bull, near Eugene, Oregon.
A new food spot is now open at the Albuquerque, New Mexico airport featuring native foods. KJZZ's Gabriel Pietrazio reports.
First opening its doors in 1976, the restaurant was reimagined in 2020.
Every pueblo has a different style of what they cook, what they make.
Chef Josh Aragon is from the Laguna Pueblo and heads the kitchen at the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center on tribal land in the heart of Albuquerque.
It's just a combination of all the pueblos put together, all 19 as a matter of fact. And what comes out of the food is the smiles, the thoughts, the full bellies.
From fry bread and enchiladas to daily hand-baked goods like Pueblo pies, tortillas, and lots of loaves of bread.
Yesterday I did 3 batches, so about 104 plus 240 dough balls.
Rita Toledo is the head baker and now has to prepare even more fresh dishes to feed hungry customers at Albuquerque International Sunport.
The bread we bake, somebody's going to take somewhere out of state. That's exciting.
For National Native News, I'm Gabriel Pietrazio.
And I'm Antonia Gonzalez.
National Native News is produced by Kawanak Broadcast Corporation with funding by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Skugtash. For more than 40 years, Ramona Farms has revived ancient traditional foods, tepary beans, pinoli, polentas, and more, all from store.ramonafarms.com. Ramona Farms supports this show. Tom Yang.
Support by Sonosky Chambers Law, championing tribal sovereignty and Native American rights since 1976. From opioids litigation to treaty rights to tribal self-governance. With offices in Washington, D.C., New Mexico, California, and Alaska. Sonosky Chambers Law.
Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.
This is Native America Calling. I'm Sean Spruce. Shinnecock Nation citizens are fighting a court case that could determine the future of the tribe's fishing rights. Their traditional fishing territory is around Long Island, near the affluent town of Southampton. The case started when Teobi Silva received a ticket for illegal fishing 7 years ago. Since then, Silva has been in court asserting his tribal fishing rights. The case is now in federal court and could have much larger cultural and economic implications for Shinnecock tribal members. Also, the case is garnering support from Native advocacy groups like the Native American Rights Fund and the National Congress of American Indians. Today we'll talk with Shinnecock citizens and the tribe's legal representatives on the importance of the case. Let's now meet today's guests. Joining us from Shinnecock Reservation, the Shinnecock Reservation in New York, is Teobi Silva. He is a fisherman and a plaintiff in the Silva versus Farish case. He is Shinnecock. Teobi, hello. Welcome to the show today.
Hi. Thanks for having us. Super excited about being here and talking about this very important issue.
Absolutely. Joining us also today is Riley Plummer, who is in Bemidji, Minnesota. He is an attorney and represents the plaintiffs in the Silva versus Farish case. He's a citizen of the Red Lake Nation. Riley, hello to you as well. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Joining us from the road in New York is Randy King. He is a former chairman of the Board of Trustees for the Shinnecock Nation. He is, of course, Shinnecock also. Randy, welcome to the show. Hello.
Hi, Sean. Thanks for having me today.
Absolutely. And joining us from Boulder, Colorado via Zoom, we have Ashley Dawn Anderson. She is the Tribal Water Institute Fellow at the Native American Rights Fund, and she is a citizen of Cherokee Nation. Ashley, good morning and welcome to Native America Calling.
Good morning, Sean. Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
I'm happy to have all of you on this show today. And Teobi, I want to begin with you. Let's start with how this case first came about. You were originally charged with illegal fishing in 2018. Can you tell us what happened that day?
Yeah, sure. So it was an April morning. It was early. I was using a fyke net. A fyke net is a kind of a stationary net that funnels fish into it. And it filters out, bigger fish that were not. It's very selective, I should say, in the species it goes after. And we were fishing for glass eels. I had created a company with my uncle, Jonathan Smith. He's also a plaintiff in this case, and it was the Shinnecock Eel Company. And we had been fishing for eels for quite some time. And when my uncle, John, he was out of town that day, I gathered the eels up from the net. It was about 6 o'clock in the morning, very crisp, early. I remember it as clear as the day. And I'm walking back towards my vehicle, and these two gentlemen were standing kind of off to the side of this little path through the woods. They asked me, "What's in the bucket?" I said, "Oh, just a little bit of bait. Don't worry about it." I got back to my vehicle, and they identified themselves as New York State DEC officers and demanded to know what was in the bucket. And 7 years later, here we are today.
And now we're in federal court. So how did we get from that April morning in 2018 to federal court, Teobi?
So initially what we did was I got a series of criminal tickets. I believe one was for eels eels undersize, eels over limit, so too many eels, and then fishing with a fyke net without a commercial license. We went to state court. Now, we tried to remove it to federal court, but during the whole process, the state trial just kind of worked itself out. I was not guilty on 2 charges. I was guilty on the commercial net without a license, commercial size net without a license. We did remain in a federal court, though. We're in a federal district court. Myself, my uncle Jonathan, and then also one of my other uncles, Gerard Smith, Roddy. And he joined us because he's another, just avid outdoorsman, loves fishing, hunting, gathering, clam bakes, and anything to do, excuse me, with the marine resources. I mean, he's really about it. So we really dug our heels in on this federal case to try to put a stop to, this harassment. Both of my uncles have received, some kind of criminal citation or summons from the New York State Environmental Department. And, again, we got tired of it. We know what our rights are. Our rights are, they're as old as the seas, it's just as standard as any other kind of Aboriginal right that you're going to find, across the country and across the world. We know what our rights are. And again, we got tired of it. So we proceeded through the federal court system in the district court. We lost in that. We appealed it to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, and we won. So now that was in 2022 when we finished up with a victory in the Second Circuit. We were remanded with instructions to basically now redo the case. Now we defeated state sovereign immunity, so that's lifted. And now we're here to deal with the merits of the case, the historical and legal factors that determine our right to fish.
Well, tell us more about the merits here and exactly how you tie this case in with this very long-seated traditional tribal right to fish.
Well, that's actually kind of a complicated question. Shinnecock is a maritime community, certainly an Aboriginal maritime community. And I would say, just the bounty of the seas is sometimes what we might call it. It's inseparable from who Shinnecock is. And I always try to make a couple of points here. The very first examination of a European about Long Island Indians was about Shinnecock, amongst others, right? And this gentleman, he was a Dutch official around the year 1628. He made the observation that the Shinnecock Indians made their living by planting corn and selling wampum. Now, wampum is a derivative from a clam shell. And we're blessed with the waters around Long Island where, the proliferation of the purple shell to the quahog clam, it's everywhere. But it's just due to the mineral content of the waters in and around Long Island, excuse me, where you get a significant amount of that purple shell. So now, when we use wampum as a term, we also have to understand that was the original coin of the colonial realm. If you do enough research, you'll find wampum, basically being what gold is today, or the U.S. dollar. But wampum was the original coin of the realm, as we say. And Shinnecock, along with several other nations in and around the New England area, but in particular Shinnecock, Montaukett, and Umpqua nations, we really created the wampum to fuel trade, right? So that's a historical, again, we're inseparable. That's a historical portion of it. Now you can fast forward from, let's say, that point to around the year 1670. Now, often when you hear about whaling in North America, you just hear that random Indians, started working with the colonists and created whaling organizations or whaling companies, as they were called back then. That's true, but guess what? Shinnecock also was in the forefront there. In the year 1670, the first whaling contract was created by the colonists in their setting in a contract between a gentleman, a forefather for the town of Southampton, and a number of Shinnecock Indians. So whaling, wampum, these were all huge parts of our cultural, spiritual, and certainly economic resources going back to the early 1600s. And we've continued that tradition. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I want to ask you more about the economic aspects here, because these tiny eels, I understand these are elvers, and they are a staple in some Asian countries. So there's an economic benefit here. This is a form of commercial fishing that you and your relatives practice. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so eels again. I mean, we kind of look at anything that's in the sea. It's fair game, to a certain degree, right? Generally, what I mean by that, seaweed was a big commodity for us as well, up into and through the 1800s. Seaweed would just accrete onto the shores. We would gather it and sell it for feed or insulation or whatever. So again, we've been, just harvesting the bounty of the seas forever. A modern day interpretation of that is going to be the glass eel or the elver fishing industry. And there isn't a lot of that going on Long Island. There isn't a New York State fishery for it, but it was really kind of fate that we found it. My Uncle John and I were talking about it one day. We just kind of used our local knowledge to figure out where the fish might be, and we found them. And once we found them, what we wanted to do was try to really figure out what this industry looks like. Part of it is, yes, you're right. What happens with the elver fishery is they get transported from anywhere here on the East Coast, typically out of Maine, but anywhere out of the East Coast, and they go to China. And in China, they go into aquaculture facilities. The American eel does not spawn in captivity, so they're only wild caught. Science hasn't been able to create an eel spawning area, and they're raised in China. From there, they go to Japan, or they come back to here as a form of sushi. The big impetus for this industry was the tsunamis in the 2010s that wiped out a lot of the Japan coastal infrastructure. So their ability to generate the elvers was greatly diminished, and that's where the demand started to hugely spike, in particular on the East Coast of the United States.
Thanks, Teobi. We're going to take a short break and we'll continue this conversation. Shinnecock Nation citizens fighting a court case that could determine the future of the tribe's fishing rights. Stay with us. We'll be right back. This is Sean Spruce, host of Native America Calling. You can listen in every weekday to hear the only national call-in show from a Native American perspective. We explore topics that range from traditional cultural practices to up-to-the-minute news that affects every American. We hope you can join us for the next Native America Calling.
Program support by the Colorado Plateau Foundation, a Native-led foundation supporting Native-led initiatives protecting lands, waters, and cultures of the Plateau for generations to come. The Colorado Plateau Foundation helps to build networks, community, and organizational capacity. The Colorado Plateau Foundation is accepting grant proposals through September 5th. Eligibility information is available at coloradoplateaufoundation.org.
Thank you for listening to Native America Calling. We are looking at a court case involving Shinnecock tribal citizens and what it means for the future of fishing rights. Riley Plummer is our next guest, and he is an attorney that represents the plaintiffs in the Silva versus Farish case that we're talking about today. And Riley, I want to ask you about some of the unique challenges that this case presents here. The Shinnecock Nation, as I understand, never signed a treaty with the U.S. government. Their treaties extend back to the 1600s with Great Britain. What does that mean with regard to this case that we're talking about today?
Yeah, what that really means, I think, is just kind of helping educate the court here, the federal district court, on what that exactly means in terms of, these rights not needing a treaty in order for them to exist in the first place. And I think that's one kind of misconception that a lot of people have, is that treaties create rights, but they never did. They never did from the start. All treaties really do is recognize the existence of existing Aboriginal rights. And when it comes in the context of a first contact tribe like Shinnecock, that never went anywhere. And treaties weren't a thing, with the United States and Shinnecock when the United States came into existence. So I think that's one thing that we try to approach this case with, is that it's unique in that Shinnecock does not have any federal treaty with the United States, but it also fits within the existing legal framework that has existed from the beginning, with cases like Johnson v. McIntosh, that tribes have rights that are inherent, and these rights continue to exist until they're either voluntarily relinquished by the tribe, or a sovereign, could be Great Britain, for instance, acts in a way that's adverse to the tribe, and that there's a plain and clear and unequivocal intent to try to relinquish those rights from the tribe. So that's what our big task was. It was just kind of educating the court here in applying how these fundamental federal Indian law principles apply to a first contact tribe that does not have a treaty, and how the treaty doesn't create the rights anyway.
Riley, for the sake of argument, let's say that there was a treaty between the Shinnecock and the United States federal government. Would that change this case substantially?
I think so. I think that it would just turn on, canons of like Indian construction, whereas you would look at the plain language of the treaty, if there's any, construction of the treaty that's would be interpreted in favor of the Indians and more liberally and things like that. So I think it would be more like straightforward in that sense, that we would just be confined to the four corners of a document. But, when we're talking about Aboriginal rights, we're looking at, where the tribe and its members have existed since time immemorial, the kind of resources and reliance on the maritime resources surrounding the area. So it is different, and I think it does make it more unique. And if it were a treaty case, yeah, I think it would just be more commonplace, because you look at cases like U.S. v. Washington over in the Pacific Northwest with the Bolt decision. You look at in the Midwest, Minnesota v. Mille Lacs, with that case, and then you also have like United States v. Michigan, and other cases dealing with treaties and how those treaties retained the pre-existing Aboriginal rights. So I think it would be a lot different and maybe some ways easier. But like I said just a little bit ago, the fundamental Indian law principles would still control here, regardless of whether or not they're Aboriginal rights or treaty rights.
All right. I'm glad you mentioned those other important cases, landmark cases such as the Bolt decision. We've done shows on some of these other cases over the years as well, but it really, really underscores the need for us to understand what's ultimately at stake with this case, and what could this potentially mean for tribal fishing in this region of New York?
I think there's just kind of a lot at stake in terms of just like, how these rights continue to exist into the 21st century, and that, tribes and their members are still here and not going anywhere, and that states need to accommodate, recognize, and respect inherent tribal rights. So I think that, if anything, one thing that I think like the Bolt decision and other, prior cases kind of illustrate is that it could potentially bring the tribe and the state of New York together to kind of co-regulate and co-manage natural resources, including but not limited to fishery resources, and have them work on a sovereign-to-sovereign basis, which has been done all across the country with tribes and states where they have overlapping jurisdiction. And I think, as these other examples across the country indicate, is that the natural resources themselves are better off when the states states and tribes kind of respect each other's shared jurisdiction, and they can work together to co-manage and co-regulate natural resources. But that's just not what has happened here. New York just has not come to the table. That they don't want to, respect the tribe's rights, and they want to litigate, these issues. But we would definitely like to come forward and to find some sort of workable arrangement where both sovereigns can move forward in some respectable manner. But that just hasn't happened.
The state of New York maintains the Shinnecock are subject to the same fish and wildlife rules as every other citizen. That's interesting. Have there been any other tribal fishing rights cases established in New York as a precedent for any of this?
No, there isn't, and that's what's unique about the Shinnecock. Being the only federally recognized tribe in New York that's on Long Island with lands directly abutting the Atlantic Ocean, so where fishing would take place. So that's why there's just a lack of precedent on these issues in the District Court of New York and also the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. And that's why we're really just trying to educate the court here on what these rights look like and how it's not really any new precedent. What we're really going after here is what's been affirmed in other cases, like the Bolt decision in other cases. So it's not anything new. It's just like applying these existing legal principles in the context of Shinnecock.
All right. I want to go back to Teobi Silva and Teobi here again, going back 2018. I mean, this is ongoing 7 years. That's a long time. What is your ultimate hope with this case? What do you want to accomplish?
Well, I mean, I think Riley really articulated it very well. I mean, ideally, what we're looking for at a base level is just to conduct our business and be left alone. To be able to sustain ourselves. We're not asking for anybody to do anything for us. We're asking for the state to basically leave us alone. But in Riley's terminology, to co-manage, that's also a goal here as well. We have a lot of economic needs. There's a lot of food sovereignty needs that are always out there. And, we just want to be able to participate without being accosted by the state.
All right, thank you, Teobi. Let's bring Randy King into our conversation now. He is a former chairman of the Board of Trustees for the Shinnecock Nation. And Randy, appreciate you joining the show from the road there, pulling over, as I understand it, so we can get a little better audio with you. Now, let's talk about some history here with the Shinnecock Nation. You were a tribal leader before the tribe was actually federally recognized. Can you talk about how the state's understanding of tribal sovereignty has changed since that time, from pre to post federal recognition?
Hi. So thanks for having me once again. And you'll probably hear some seagulls passing by, which is apropos to the dialogue. The recognition. So it was a 33-year-long odyssey where the hurdles were constantly being moved, along with the fact that the tribe had to, exhaust a lot of resources to accumulate a lot of the material that was vetted through by the department. And within that information and how the state sees it, I think it's the state has always been kind of mystified by us. And if you look at the upstate tribes in New York, take the Mohawk, for example, their trustee system, it was imposed on both of us, Shinnecock and Mohawk. It was a three-person trustee system that was imposed in 1792. And, that was to afford the tribe to run its own business and to look after the people, what the people's needs were. But we always did that. That was a given. That was always done. And I think as time transpired, also keep in mind that, we're a first contact tribe, and we're in a resort area like other tribes, such as the Mashpee Wampanoag, the Quina, Gayhead on Martha's Vineyard. Those are premier resort areas. And to live, next to one another, shared jurisdiction, I don't think they could really understand in a contemporary sense how to deal with us, how to, try to curtail a tribe's, forward progress and not alienate, the assembled people around the borders of the tribe. How is that done? And I think, it's always an uphill challenge from the federal recognition in 2010, from us filing our land claim, I think in 2006, 2007, and, having colonial era, elements such as latches, hinder our forward progress. We've always fought for our rights. New York State knows we've always fought for our rights. Up to this very day with the monument litigation and the gas station litigation, we've always had to fight for what, we need as tribal leadership to provide for the people.
This current fight, then, with regard to the fishing, I mean, ultimately, how does this all fit in with the Shinnecock's overall affirmation of sovereignty? Will it strengthen it if things go the way you hope they do?
Well, once again, it's still always a challenge with the shared, or the strict lines of demarcation and jurisdiction. You have active trustees for the town of Southampton that are carrying out code for the town of Southampton, but actively coming into our territory and destroying our oyster beds, and by tearing them up with the props from underneath the boats, and there's always sources of friction and confrontation. At our West Woods territory, which is bounded by Peconic Bay, you have day trippers and boaters that come in and land on our shores and leave their refuse, and just it's a source of confrontation with our tribal people, telling them to back those boats up and leave our territory. But I have to say that the town of Southampton Bay Constables have been, a good resource in terms of helping us, to execute on keeping them out. We set up a boundary buoy system, to set those lines of where they were to turn back. Because God forbid one of those boats hits a tribal person or a youth out there in the water, it wouldn't be good. So, it continues to this day.
Randy, hearing you describe these events and these issues, it really sounds like there's just a lack of overall education from the broader public there in these surrounding communities with regard to these tribal fishing rights and perhaps some of these other rights as well. And I'm curious to know, how knowledgeable do you think some of these surrounding communities are, and what does it take with regard to outreach or awareness so that they understand exactly what this case is about and why you folks are so adamant about fighting this?
Well, on a state level, you have your DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation, breakout sessions and conferences where we, along with other tribes in New York State, are in terms of fishing pollution, beetle infestation on some of the trees, and it boils down to education and who we are as a Shinnecock people. And at one point, the state was being proactive in designating liaisons, native liaisons to interact with the tribe, to absorb this information and to tell it back to, the higher ups within the state's administration, on what the friction points are and what the tribe's rights are. So that happened during the Hochul, prior to Hochul also, governor of the state of New York. Tayobi didn't mention, I don't know if he did or not, that he is a former tribal leader, a trustee, and his grandfather, Charles Smith, Chief Red Fox, he served probably, I think, the longest out of all the trustees. And during his time, way back, and not that far back, but far enough, and he was quoted in Newsday during the federal recognition saga that in terms of where we are and how they viewed us as a people, that it's not that you don't understand us, you can't understand us. And that was in Newsday. And that was...
All right, going to go back to Tayobi Silva here. And Tayobi, we're hearing from Randy. He talks about... Hello, Ashley. Are you there? Okay.
Hi, yeah, I'm here.
Alrighty, Ashley. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and just continue the interview with you right now. You're joining us via Zoom, Tribal Water Institute Fellow at the Native American Rights Fund. And I want to talk a little bit more about this case with you. And what are supporters saying about the merits that it presents in the overall larger fight for tribal fishing rights? I mean, we've already heard about some of these other landmark decisions in other parts of the country. How does this case fit in?
So first, this case has a lot of support. There were 4 amicus briefs filed, and amicus briefs are supplemental briefs from non-parties to the case. They're parties that have an interest in the outcome of the case. So this case is really important across the country. So the Native American Rights Fund represented the Shinnecock kelp farmers and the National Congress of American Indians to write an amicus brief just informing the judge on the fundamentals of Aboriginal rights. And then the United South and Eastern Tribe Sovereignty Protection Fund wrote an amicus brief on how these rights continue unless they're explicitly extinguished by the United States. Then we also had an amicus brief submitted by law and history professors that examined the deeds that the New York Department of Environmental Conservation is relying on, and their brief shows that New York is wrong. These documents do not extinguish Shinnecock's Aboriginal fishing rights. And then we had another amicus brief from the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission, and their amicus brief was on how successful co-management of off-reservation fisheries can be. So there's a lot of support across the country for this case, and it has a lot of merit.
All right. Thank you, Ashley. We're going to take another short break. We'll come back and continue our conversation.
Support by the American Indian College Fund. The American Indian College Fund provides millions of dollars of scholarships to thousands of Native students every year. Tribal citizens of every age and experience are eligible. The deadline for applications is May 31st, and you can find everything you need to apply at collegefund.org. That's collegefund.org or by phone at 800-766-FUND. Education is the answer.
You're listening to Native America Calling. We are continuing our discussion now on a fishing rights case involving the Shinnecock Nation in New York. Part of this discussion has to do with inherent rights of sovereignty that tribes possess, regardless of whether or not they have treaties with the federal government. Let us know what you think about that. Share your insights. 1-800-99-NATIVE. We're talking now with Ashley Dawn Anderson, the Tribal Water Institute Fellow at the Native American Rights Fund. And Ashley, before break, you shared how organizations like NARF and NCAI wrote amicus briefs. Tell us more about the larger implications, though, of this case for tribal sovereignty specifically.
For sure. This case is really important because it's holding states accountable to tribal nations. It's showing that states can't ignore the inherent rights of tribal nations. Shinnecock Nation's Aboriginal fishing rights have never been extinguished, but the state of New York is acting as if they had. The Shinnecock Nation has the right to manage its fishing resources, and its tribal members have the right to fish as they always have on their ancestral territory. So the state of New York just needs to recognize and respect the rights of the Shinnecock Nation, and that's something every state in the country can do better. They can establish better sovereign-to-sovereign relationships with tribal nations, especially regarding natural resources that we have to share.
Ashley, you also represent the Shinnecock kelp farmers. Can you talk about this group and what their interest is in the case?
Yeah, the Shinnecock kelp farmers are super cool. They're a collective of Shinnecock women who grow kelp in the Shinnecock Bay, and they grow kelp to continue their traditional ways of life and traditional economies, but the kelp also improves the water quality. Growing kelp improves water quality because it absorbs carbon and nitrogen from the water. So the Shinnecock kelp farmers are interested in this case because they would like to continue their traditional activity of growing and harvesting kelp in their ancestral waters.
Now, is there an economic benefit to the kelp farming as well?
Yeah, I believe Randy was mentioning it earlier. Kelp, they gather and sell kelp
Okay.
for like insulation, and he mentioned a few other things, but
All right. Thank you, Ashley.
yeah.
Well, Randy, I want to ask you, let's go back to Randy King. And again, I asked earlier Tayobi about the economic benefits that are at stake here. And can you talk about the overall economic benefits potentially to the Shinnecock Nation, the whole tribe, that could be hinged on this case that we're talking about today?
As Tayobi touched on earlier, you had Shinnecock whaling companies, and we could emulate that. And it's always a return to past practices, cultural practices that we've always known. The colonists relied on us to show them how to sound whales up on the beach, in the shoals, in the low tide areas, and to use the oils and to use the blubber. And to this day, the fins and the baleen are written into town code that the Shinnecock will have the right of first refusal to that. So, I mean, we could, start a Shinnecock fishing fleet. And for, the fishermen, fisherwomen, fisher people that are throughout the nation, the tribe could maintain a fleet of vessels and to go out and sell back to the larger community. We could create fisheries, which are, they exist along those first contact tribes that are out on the waters. I mentioned, Aquina Wampanoag. I'm pretty sure they have a fishery. Mashpee. You have the Narragansett tribe in Rhode Island, also a first contact tribe in these resort areas where our rights are being diminished, have been diminished, and are consistently being diminished. So Tayobi can probably speak more on that economic benefit. He's analyzed it, he's researched it, it's out there. And we're just, like you said, we're looking to cooperate and be, good neighbors as we always have. And just to provide for ours and to provide for the larger area.
Thanks, Randy. Tayobi, yeah, let's talk more about, and really what I would like to hear is just your overall vision for the future of fishing for tribal members in the community. But I also want to ask you first, Tayobi, are you still fishing right now? Have you been out on the water recently?
We kind of had an internal agreement amongst ourselves that we'd let the process play out, whatever way it would go, the legal process. Of course, we didn't know it would take 7 years to kind of just get started, but yeah, so commercial fishing is out. Recreational, sure, yeah, we still do that. My Uncle John, another plaintiff here, yeah, he maintains a small aquaculture facility growing oysters here and there. But we stay involved recreationally. But Sean, I did want to jump back to another point here, and Randy was starting to talk about a little bit too, about some of the economic benefits of this. And yes, I am a former tribal leader years ago now. But one of the things that I kind of noticed was that when you talk to tribes, whether it's Shinnecock or wherever, very often you get back to gaming as like the sole economic driver in a lot of these communities. And I did kind of look at some of the financial structure support systems that are around a fishing industry, certainly in our area. And it can provide an alternative or supplement to gaming. I'm not saying, hey, take gaming off the table, but I always encourage people, whether it's within my tribe, other tribe members, or the tribal leaders, to really be creative when you talk about economic development and don't get caught in the box of always gaming. You have to inventory your resources and then see what are your opportunities within the inventory of resources. What makes sense? What can you do? Shinnecock, historically a maritime community, us re-engaging in fishing commercially, we've been re-engaging with commercial fishing as a nation going back almost 6 decades now with our own oyster aquaculture facility. And this is just a continuation in it. And what's very interesting here, when you talk about a fishing industry, it's very there's a lot of different moving parts there. There's a lot of different places for actors to get involved with it. It's not just out in the swamps or out in boats and, in the ocean. There's a lot of transportation needs, packing, warehousing needs. So, that's kind of my vision, is for a comprehensive, low natural resource impact, but still a comprehensive program that is an economic driver. It's a jobs driver. And you don't necessarily need a certain set of skills. What you need is the vision and to be working with the right team to implement, the resources that are available to you.
Toby, you mentioned gaming. And as I understand the Shinnecock Nation, you folks are planning on building a casino on the eastern end of Long Island. How's that coming along, and how could that you mentioned how the fishing could complement that industry, but just talk a little bit more about the overall economic vision of the tribe going forward.
Well, gaming, that's a more Randy King appropriate question, as he's still within the rotation of tribal leaders. Just my overall impression of it is, it's always going to be a hurdle with New York State. And I think whether it's fishing, whether it's gaming, you name it, whatever else we're involved with, we always run into jurisdictional issues with the state, local municipalities, the counties, and there's always going to be pushback. And there seems to be a relatively large, and I would say relatively new effort to make sure that, not only us, but, Native folks in general are excluded. And that's from, a lot of beneficial activities, whether they're economic driven or not. There's a lot of pushback. For example, with fishing, we never got tickets. We never got into any trouble until, I would say, the early 2000s. So this is a 20-year thing. We used to work with and support the local municipalities as well as the state, but there's just a lot of pushback. Gaming is another animal altogether, because in our area, in our region, very highly developed suburb of the New York metro area, you're talking about $1 billion, if you're lucky, and if the market is still swinging that direction. It's $1 billion a year net generating industry on itself. That's a huge deal. And $1 billion is, I think, being conservative. So there's a lot of interest in there, whether it's special interest groups, various governor groups, various governor executive chambers, local interest. And to me, it's always been a puzzle very difficult to solve. Not saying that you can't solve it, but there's a lot of moving parts in there, and the tribe itself has to create its own vision. Where does it go? What does it look like? Who do you partner with? Right? And it's a very complicated, convoluted set of circumstances. But for us, I believe anything is possible.
Teobi, listening to Randy earlier describe the possibility of at some point having a fleet of ships, Shinnecock fishing ships that would be out there, boats that would be out there, harvesting elvers. The potential here sounds enormous. What are you hearing from other community members? Are most folks on board with this, what sounds like a potentially very lucrative economic venture, but also something that ties in so closely with your tribe's history and culture and tradition?
I say that without question. There's a tremendous amount of support in the community for it, because it's close to heart. You know what I'm saying? When we all grew up in this same community, right? We all have the same experiences, whether it's so another thing, and if I could just piggyback on Ashley's point a little while ago in your question to her, one of the other benefits of kelp farming, that's a habitat for our local bay scallops to grow in. Our bay scallops have been decimated since the brown tide, which is an algal plume, in or around 1985. And, when I was a kid, I'm a little bit older than that, but when I was a kid, we would be able to find kelp washed up on the shores of the reservation beaches and find scallops, within the kelp beds. But those days are gone. So another part of the kelp farming effort is to restabilize the local environment to provide kind of nurseries and locales for these beneficial organisms to live. So I mean, there's a lot of different ways to skin this cat, but I would say overall, as comprehensively, the tribe is about it. Tribe members, tribal leadership. Now, there's going to be varying levels of that, but it's not something you get a lot of pushback on. It's something that's, again, it's part of our culture, it's part of our history, it's part of our traditions, it's part of our legal history. We have a lot of different legal interactions over the centuries involving Shinnecock fishermen, Shinnecock whaling in particular. It was a huge one. The seaweed cultivation, we have a lot of history with it. And I think, using myself as an example, when you're active with the maritime resources, it sings to who you are.
Now, there's also competition here. And as I understand it, there's a limited number of licenses. And that's a big part of this case as well, is getting access to those licenses. And tell us more about that competition. Who are these other businesses or individuals or organizations that are out there doing potentially the same type of commercial enterprise, fishing for elvers?
The non-native actors here would be largely governed, by the Atlantic State Marine Fishery Commission, and that's a interstate compacted. I believe it's all the states on the East Coast are part of this commission, and they regulate the quotas for fish. And the quotas for fish, they vary by state. There's a lot of factors that go into there. And then once the various quotas are I guess, voted on by the commission, the state then can go forward and, I guess, access their part of that resource. So, for example, New York State does not have an elver or a glacial fishery. It's not something that they got out of the Atlantic State Marine Fishery Commission. Maine has one, and I believe North Carolina has a small one. But primarily when you're talking about elvers, you're talking about Maine. Now, this is just my theory. This is my opinion. I think our rights are set aside from that. I don't think that we fall into the Atlantic State Marine Fishery Commission. None of their formation or founding documents talk about anything native driven. They don't talk about not even recognizing our rights, but even acknowledging them. There's no set aside here for us. There's no place for us. And that's wrong. So I believe that, if you look at it like a pyramid with the commission at the top, and then you get all the way down to the baseline stakeholders, that's going to be your baymen, local fishers, and everybody in the middle, there's room for us all to work together. And I think the closer we can get some of these, local actors to understand that we can benefit the majority here. We have a lot of knowledge, we have a lot of traditions that are they're not relatable to your standard municipality, the way they govern, right? So, for example, New York State had no idea that these elver eels were in a Shinnecock Bay. How do I know that? I read their stock assessments over decades. They had no idea, but we did. We knew that. We understand the value of building the culverts. That's another residual case out of the US v. Washington Judge Bolt stuff.
All right. Teobi, I want to ask you, we've got about a minute before you have to wrap. I want to ask you one more question here. What's the perfect solution for you and the other community members? What would you like to be able to do and accomplish with your fishing if this lawsuit goes the way as you hope it does?
All rights are respected, somewhat understood, and we're left to fish unmolested. And all of that is a springboard to the tribe itself being active in the fisheries, the tribe itself regulating, issuing our own licenses in waters in and around Long Island. That's really where we want to land at with this.
All right. Well, thank you so much, all of our guests who joined us today, Teobi Silva, Riley Plummer, Randy King, and Ashley Dawn Anderson. We are out of time. We're going to have to wrap up the discussion. Join us again tomorrow, though. Please tune in. Until then, I'm Sean Spruce. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Support provided by Amerind. Amerind is 100% tribally owned.
and partners with tribes and their businesses to provide affordable commercial insurance coverage, protect tribal sovereignty, and strengthen Native American communities by helping to keep dollars in Indian country. Information about property, liability, commercial auto, and workers' comp available at Amerind.com. That's AMERIND.com. More than a museum, the Alaska Native Heritage Center represents all Alaska Native peoples in a living cultural center where the traditions, languages, and arts of Alaska Native peoples come to life through cultural programming and exhibitions, life-size village sites, live performances, demonstrations, and dynamic exhibits are all just minutes from downtown Anchorage. Open 7 days a week, there is always something new to discover at the Alaska Native Heritage Center who support this show. More at alaskanative.net.
Native America Calling is produced in the Annenberg National Native Voice Studios in Albuquerque, New Mexico by Koahnic Broadcast Corporation, a Native nonprofit media organization. Funding is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting with support from the Public Radio Satellite Service. Music is by Brent Michael Davids. Native Voice One, the Native American Radio Network.